Hey everyone, it's Friday and we are live. Welcome if you're coming in from YouTube, if you're coming in from Facebook, X, LinkedIn, wherever you're coming from. So I'm Eric, I'm your host for today. We're talking streets, but I'm not alone. I've got somebody joining me on the line. Charles, are you there?
I am here and ready to go today on this beautiful Friday.
Beautiful Friday. All right. Yes, thank you all for giving up your time. We know you've got choices. We know you got things to do. We know depending on what time zone you're coming from. Again, if there's some shout outs coming in, let us know where you're joining from. I know we always get people from all over the place. I know who knows what time it is. I know it's in the UK, it's already dinner time, if you're joining us from over there. So I don't really have a lot to say. Charles, do you have any big announcements that we need to get off out of the way right now? Let's do that. Otherwise, I'm ready to go. I love this topic. I can't wait. I've got a lot to say about it. I want to get going.
I think the only thing right now, I mean, we got some announcements like during the show, but the one right now, if any of you are going to be at AIA in Washington
That's
D.C.
right.
Next week, come say hi. We've got a booth out there. I'll be there. We'll be showing off some cool stuff, things coming up with SketchUp, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So.
I'll be there too. We'll be demoing SketchUp. We're going to be it's AIA's American Institute of Architects. But it's not just architects. It's going to be a lot of people. So we've got a lot of cool things on hand. SketchUp booth, SketchUp socks for those that are collecting socks. So we'll see you then. It's a good reminder. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to shrink my head because I always get a little self-conscious when I'm like taking up the full screen. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink myself down really quick so we can get that chat showing. Let's do that. All right, we've got our chat up and we are ready to go. I'm going to make the chat a little bit smaller. It means if you're really chatty, you might cut that off, you know what I mean? If you're like typing paragraphs, but that's okay. We're doing our best here. So, streetscapes. This is kind of my baby. So I want to just kind of be full disclosure. I've got a lot that I love about streets, and I'm going to just kind of pepper you with stuff, whether you like it or not, as far as fun facts, tips and tricks, best practices, some back-end knowledge to think about while you're designing. And then, of course, we're doing this in SketchUp, so we're going to leverage all the cool tools that we have at our disposal, including components, so that we're not modeling the entire thing, we're just modeling elements, and then we can flip, mirror, repeat, and do things like that. So, and customize, make unique. So that's going to be kind of our process, and show, don't tell, right? So let's get into it. Charles, as always, let me know what's coming in with the chat. And I would love to hear stories, experience, challenges, questions. Bring it in. Let's keep this conversation going. And with that, we're going to start. Where are we starting though? I have to ask myself that question. Okay, so what I want to do is start with an existing street. Now there's a couple things we can do. Charles and I were talking right before this stream, is that most people have, and I'm going to pull up ad location for this, most people have streets in their neighborhood that are what you'd call a suburban arterial. So even if you're not from the United States, you probably have these big arterial roads that are just cars going 50 miles an hour, 6, 7, 8 lanes. Not the most fun place to walk. Well, a lot of cities are going through the process of kind of reimagining their streets. And that's kind of what we're going to do here is we're going to look at reimagining a street that I think needs some love. So I'm going to go to my hometown. I'm not going to show you I'm not there anymore. It's my hometown. It's where I grew up. Orange, California, sprawling suburb, Southern California, right? But there's this street that runs east-west, and it is a major arterial that sort of collects all the neighborhoods, and you can see it right here. And this is kind of when I think about a street that sort of doesn't do a great job at placemaking and supporting walkability and all of that, this is kind of the street that I'm imagining. You can see it's a lot of asphalt. It's not the most fun place to be. So if I want to, I can use add location and I can go ahead and import that, but I already know kind of the dimensions in my head. I'll bring it in just in case we want to reference it, just so we have something. But you kind of get the idea of what the kind of street that I'm talking about, which is curb cuts, lots of lanes. So Charles, we were just talking in the chat, you're familiar with, having to ride your bike or having to walk down some of these kind of bigger streets.
Yeah, Yeah, so let's see real quick. Let me jump back to this here. Yeah, so I are we still in my area? Is that where we're looking, or are we?
Oh no, I'm in my hometown, but feel free to give me your experience. So here's the thing: is that I think we all like this kind of street, this sort of like it's what we call strode. A strode is a street and a road, right? A strode is kind of
Right.
like it's not a real, it's not it doesn't really function really great as a street. It's also not a road, which you'd find in like a rural environment.
Right. So, where I live, the area is not. It can be walkable, but for the most part, it's not. And also, the drivers are not the most safe when it comes to pedestrians or bicyclists. And my experience, I have been hit by cars while biking 3 different times.
Ooh, yikes!
So, yeah, it's not a lot of fun. It's a lot of people not paying attention to what's happening around them, and that's my experience. It's great. Love getting hit by cars. It's a delight.
I actually haven't, but I've had stuff thrown at me when I ride my bicycle, so
Oh
I
my
don't know.
gosh.
I know it's like, come on, guys. So we do, I mean, we understand that like we're not going to say all the streets need to be turned into bicycle lanes. We're not Copenhagen, we get that, but we do need to know that we know that the trend is sort of supporting what's called multimodal, which is more transit modes, and looking also at creating spaces to gather. Like if you look at the pandemic, turning parking places into parklets, whether that's temporary or permanent, we'll argue that point in the chat. But this idea that there is a lot of room, there's a lot of opportunity, and that's just kind of the basis of today's stream. So let's talk about what those. Let's just assume that that's the project, that's the directive. What is the opportunity? And by the opportunity, I mean what can you even fit in the space? So I mean this is pretty typical. This is Orange, California. This is a 100-foot right of way. Right of way is sort of the space between what's called back of curb to back of curb. So everything into that is going to be what we're talking about within the transit. And then beyond that is the private development, right? So the road is public, and then you have the private development. But the two of those are going to work together, and we're going to show you why here in just a minute. So if I kind of measure this out, it's 100 feet with 8-foot sidewalks, which means that just loosely talking, we've got about 84 feet to work with what's called the travel way. So let's go ahead and just build that out. I'm going to start by just building a section of it. And then what we can do is we can decide whether we want to do the intersection. I want to start with the before condition, and then we're going to do the after condition so we can compare.
Cool.
How does that sound, Mr. Charles?
That sounds great to me.
All right. Now, for those of you who saw my video on doing a whole design with just one component, you probably think I'm crazy, but this is kind of what I'm talking about, which is like, I'm just going to use one component, which is just a rectangle. And then from there, it's just, for me, it's almost easier than redrawing it each time. I just copy it. So in this case, I've got a sidewalk component. And then now I grab this and I'm going to have a street component. But I also have to know, in this case, I have to know if I do want to stretch this, I have to think about, first I have to do some math. So we need to know if the street is symmetrical, which they're not always. Sometimes you get a turn lane on one side. Sometimes you get a median or something like that. Or you have parking on one side, not the other. But in this case, we're going to go with the symmetrical street just to keep our lives easier. So which means I only have to model half of it, which is great. So within this zone, we have what is 42 feet. Now, if I do my math, a typical travel lane here in the United States is 12 feet. So 42 divided by 12, that's only 3.5 lanes, which doesn't really work, probably because there's a median. So what I want to do here is just kind of maybe count over 12 feet and then just go times 3. And then I'm going to guess that this middle part, and I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to assume that this is the median. So where you'd have a turn lane. So that would be another 12 feet for that sort of center turn lane. And that's kind of a flexible space. There could be planting in there, or it could just be people coming and making left and right turns. So 12 feet, 12 feet's, again, that's standard. So we're going to go with that. Not all communities use 12, but let's go with that. So this is what I mean by I'm just going to copy this. I'm just going to scale, and then I'm going to copy times 2, and then I'm going to copy and scale one more time. So in this case, I'm going to paint these which based on which color I want them. I want sidewalk to be a little bit lighter gray. And you can see I'm doing this in 2D. I'm starting in 2D, but very quickly, if we want to, we can get this into 3D. Make that a component already. Just grab half of that and scale it over. So place that into place. And if you want to, you can hide this center line. I'm going to do that at the end. So that's it. That's our 100-foot right away. I like to put some people for scale, even at this early stage. So I'm just going to grab, doesn't matter. I've got somebody in a kit of parts. And I'm just going to place them here. And I place them here for a reason is, you know, the relationship between this side of the street, and I'm going to grab his friend here. So let's say dad had to go to the yogurt shop and mom had to drop something off at the dry cleaner. I know, I'm just making this up. And then they're going to meet back at the hot dog stand or something like that. So here you can see that the relationship between one side of the street and the other, especially if I go change my camera field of view to something more like the natural eye sees at 45 degrees, you know, you're not talking to people across the street, that's for sure. And you're definitely not really excited about crossing the street. Right?
Right.
Okay, let's do this. So let's give this, let's go into this component and give it a thickness now. I'm going to show you why. We're going to go up, I don't know, 4 feet. So by making this a component, I could have gone down, but I went up. That's okay. By making this a component, you can see all I had to do was just lift one of them up, and they all lifted up, which is kind of cool. But with a curb, I have to lift one of them up a little bit higher. So I'm going to go up 6 inches, and I'm going to use the scale. Instead of using push-pull, I'm going to use the nonlinear scale just to pull that one up a little bit more. And if I wanted to, I've got a couple different ways to do sidewalks. I can either grab the whole concrete module and copy that and array it if I want to show score lines. Or what I might do is just come over here and do something like this and grab a score and go divided by, sometimes actually a little fun trick. Sometimes it helps to take 2 lines, because if you take 2 lines instead of 1, you can make that a component. And now you have a score line component. So if you change the score line for some reason, you want to give it a thickness, or you want to change the angle, or you want to add more into it, you can do that by having the score line be a component. So already I'm just kind of setting the stage for, let's see, divided by 20. I'm making up these numbers for whatever I think feels right. Select all. When it's a component, you can also use select all instances, which is just a really cool, a really fast way to, again, to sort of create a score line.
Nice.
And if I don't like that module, you know, if I don't like that one, I could just redo that. I mean, that only took a second, right? So I just take those out and say, no, that feels a little too dense. Let's do this divided by, say, 15, divided by 10. Okay. So we're only doing a section of the street because most times the street is the same as it goes. And the other thing is, if you're going to model, like if you're going to do a street design, what we may not want to do is model the entire street because it can be really long. So what you do is you pick sections, like prototypical sections or typologies, and say, okay, here's the street when you're downtown, and here's the street next to the college, and here's the street as it gets to the park, and here's the street as it transitions into a residential neighborhood. So that's why I'm only focusing on just a chunk of the street rather than, you know, a really long version of it. Of course, you can also copy this module if you want to. If you want to make this longer, you know, once you've built a prototypical module, you can just copy this component. So we can look at that here in a minute. I'm going to save this before I get too far. Yeah, I mean, anyone in the chat have? I would love pushback. I mean, I would love to learn different ways to do it. I'm totally inspired by, if you haven't read this book, like Nacto does some really cool things with street diagrams. I'm pretty sure they use SketchUp, sure looks like SketchUp. So if anyone's got experience doing this kind of stuff, let me know. I mean, I would love to learn from the people that are watching. We've got some really smart people I know that tune in every single week. So
let's look at some chats real quick.
Yeah, do that while I'm just drawing striping, so not super exciting.
Yeah, folks, just let us know like some stories that you have about like street walking. We see some people here. We've got people from Kenya. We've got people from the Bay Area. Welcome. Nick is going to be at AIA and is going to stop by and say hi to us, Nick, I'll do my best to come see you and say hi if you don't come to us. Yeah, this is so exciting. So, but yeah, anyways, go back.
No, that's perfect. Actually, I was thinking about, as you're saying that, like, you've got, when we think about what we want to do here, I'm building the existing street sort of more off of what we're starting with, sort of what we don't want, but where we're going to go next in the second half of this is imagining, what we do want. And I think, drawing on examples like in San Francisco, for example, I don't know what they're doing with Market Street. I know there's a lot of changes as far as creating bus-only lanes or adding bike infrastructure. So, and then in Kenya, never been, but I imagine you've got completely different rules and regulations than we do. So just, again, really, really, really excited. Streets are so much fun because but that's the thing we have in common, right? Like, no matter where you go, you just instantly recognize a great street as you walk down it.
Right.
So I'm putting some striping in. I made this a component, right? So this one I need to change, but I'm going to leave it there for a second. But what I'm going to do is copy these and then place them into the component by pasting in place. And so that way I'm only just working on one side, and then when I get it looking good, I paste it in place and it just moves it over to the other side. So obviously I don't need to do this half right now, but it's kind of nice because it just gives you a sense of scale. The other thing I can do is these modules, I can hide, if I want to, I can hide this inside line. The only problem with making this component is that if I'm using the same component for the streets as I am for the sidewalk, and I hide that street line, then it's going to do it on all of them. So this may be a good excuse to make the streets a unique component, because I've already now got leveraged, pulling them all up. And then in this case, they don't really necessarily need to be the same component as the sidewalk. I just see that. So when I hide those edges, it looks as if it's one street, but it's more than one. So each one's its own lane, because if I want to copy a module, I can copy a lane module and I don't have to do the math. So I'm just kind of doing this, trying to do this once, trying to be smart. Trying to be smart. We'll see if it gets there. And then you can just turn on hidden geometry. Like anytime you want to see what those center lines, if you want to line something to that center line, just turn your hidden geometry and there it is. So I want to get this median figured out though. So speaking of hidden geometry, this is my center point right here. So 42, right? So what I want to do is grab I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do this. Probably, I don't want this one, but I want to move this in, call it 1 foot. And what I may do is see about, I don't know if that works. I think I'm just going to do this manually. I don't think I can shortcut it. I think I just need to go over 3 and over 6. And what that's going to do is give me a new center stripe. I want to do this center stripe different from the lane markings. And I should probably go back to my colored mode so I can see what I'm doing. I'm lifting this off the surface by 0.1. You can go to 0.25. You can go point whatever, 0.5. The reason why inches, the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want Z fighting. So I'm literally just extruding the lane markings just above the surface. And in this case, I haven't applied any color to it. So I just kind of grabbed something that looks like this yellowish orange that you would see maybe a little bit darker, something like that. And then the same thing, if this is a center turn lane, you might get instead of having a double yellow, you might get a broken line in this case. So I could just make that a component. Everything's a component that I know is going to repeat. And then I don't need to copy that one. I can just copy it, paste it in place, because paste it in place will give me that center turn lane. So as beautiful as our existing street is, it's coming together. It's almost there. You can see how fast that came together, right? And what I like about this is I'm using a keyboard shortcut to turn it into parallel projection mode and into elevation. So bring my floating guy down. There we go. What you have here is now thinking about it in plan view and in elevation view. Because when we do streetscape, when we think about streetscapes, we think there are vertical elements, right? So if you're only looking down at it, it's going to be, you're not getting the whole story. You're only getting a part of the story. You're getting just the sort of horizontal relationship rather than the vertical relationship. So it's important that we kind of look at a streetscape both in either section elevation or in plan view, or even in Axonometric, which kind of tells the story in a little bit different way, more as a typology. So we're going to put together, maybe if we have time, we'll put together a quick little layout spread where we put all these onto one sheet, and you'll see how they kind of come together.
Cool.
Let me know if there's any questions. I'm just plowing. That's what I do. I just plow ahead, folks. So stay with me. Keep up. Let's do, you know what we're missing is when you turn the corner, when you do elevation, you miss the lane markings. So I think it's important that we come over here and just basically draw in, I think this was 4 feet. If I'm grabbing, I have to zoom in so I can grab right there. And I want to go 4 feet by 6 inches. So that's actually 6,4 feet. And then I want to do the same thing. I just kind of want to extrude this out 0.1. Now I could have copied this other module here and shrunk it, but I think it's probably okay to repeat.
Actually, I've got one question from Studio RT Cool. Do you bother to crown the road when you're doing this?
No, because crowning the road, for what people that don't know what that term means, it means that what you can't tell here is that this model, if I go here, you notice that the road is completely flat, but there's a reason why roads are not completely flat, because water likes to sit and pool on flat surfaces. So the engineers will grade the road higher in the middle, and that's why we have curbs and gutters. All the water drains to the curb and gutter. So that's what crowning the road means. And the answer is no, because it would make our lives a lot harder. And the other thing too is that can be handled with annotations. So in layout, you could say 2%, or you could say 1%, or you can put a crown. If it's not on center line, you could put a dash line and say crown line, slope to drain. You can just mark it and say it. You don't need to, there's no advantage. The reason why is because it's so subtle. It's like 1 or 2%, right? So it would just make my life harder if I created that 1% slope. So we're going to work as if we're going to annotate, if we need to intake crowns, which we don't, because if we're landscape architects, we're probably realizing that that's handled in, that'll be handled in construction documents or in a detail or in a spec or something like that. Good question. Thanks, Mr. RT Cool. Okay, I'm trying to get this to snap and it's not, so because the center line is sitting below. And I did not paint, you'll notice I'm painting the outside of the component because I'm lazy. If you are concerned about that, you can always go in and paint the inside of the component. I like it because I can use the same component and I can paint it different colors. Like for example, this one represents both the lane striping and the median striping. So if I wanted to adjust that, you'll notice I'm adjusting all of them at once, even though they've been colored differently. So, and this one here, I may pull up. This is gonna be tough because it's so thin. It's gonna be difficult for me to get the center on that one. There it is, and I might just bring that up a half. And what that does is it just indicates, I know that that's proportionally not right, but if you group those, copy those, delete those, go in, paste those in place, and then when we go here to turn hidden geometry off and elevation mode, you can see that little dashed line, while it's proportionally maybe not correct, it just indicates that it's a turn lane. Or you could just get rid of those completely if it's annoying and just say, I don't really need them, not for this purpose. Or the opposite, go back to having them be full size and just let that be double lane striping. That's okay too. All right, so that's our existing condition. Now, not very exciting. There's a couple things we can do from here if we wanted to. We could show the adjacent condition. So if I wanted to just kind of take a quick look, you can see what the adjacent condition is. I'm trying to go back into perspective mode because I know some people like that better. You can see that typically there's like a little, buffer which says, hey, if you're going to be walking between cars driving 50 miles an hour and parked cars, let's put a strip of grass in there just to kind of soften things up and make it nice, make an attempt at having it nice. So you might see a little strip of green in there or not. It just depends on what the adjacent property is, if it's a parking lot or not. So let's go ahead and do that. On one side, let's just assume that you get to park right up against the sidewalk and just how lovely that is. And then on the other side, let's go ahead and plant in, let's give that a nice good green buffer, a good 10-foot green buffer. because that kind of finishes out, that kind of rounds out the existing conditions story. And this one I'm going to not do in the, I'm not going to do it in the component because they're different on both sides. So if I did on the inside the component, I might do that, but then I would want to make it unique. So in this case, I would just pull this out 10 foot for some planting, push that down maybe 3 inches, color that, a planting color, and then I would grab one of these parking modules. So this is a lot of just working, again, kind of like a kit of parts. It's a lot of just kind of going in and grabbing a module, pasting it in place, moving it into place, and then scaling it. Or if you don't want to work with an existing module and you want to model every single one of these elements from scratch, of course you can do that. This is going to be like a little 6-inch curb just to delineate the edge of the planter. And then this is, depending on how they're parking, if they're coming in at 90 degrees, then that's going to be typically 18 feet. So I don't know what that would be. 3 meters, 3.25, something like that. If for our international folks, what we would use as a standard, you can tell me in the chat what you use as a standard parking stall. And then in this case, you would get, would do the same thing. If I want to, I can come in, if I grab this striping component, paste that here, and then move that into place. Bring that up 0.1 just to keep it so we don't get that Z fighting. And then I'm going to do that scale. There we go. So in this case, let's bring this over, what is it, 9 feet? Probably 9 by 18. It's easy to remember because 9 is half of 18 for a parking stall. Sometimes they're 10. Sometimes compact might be a little bit different. So that's 9 feet times 4. How many can we fit? Times 5. And then just for fun, I think what I want to do is just select all instances, group and center those. So I'm going to center those in that space. Where's the center line? Oh, I'm not finding it. It's there. So fun fact, I started my career doing parking lots and doing landscape architecture in parking lots. And that's when I was realizing that I was like, wait, there's got to be more to landscape architecture. There is. I'm not picking on landscape architecture, but landscape unfortunately you kind of come in sometimes late into the process. And so like the policy decision has already been made for you by the planners and by the city and by whatever the code says. Architects often site the building, engineers build utilities. So landscape architects, when they come in, sometimes they don't get a chance to say, well, actually, it'd be better if, you know what I mean? So that was something that kind of made me sad about my early days, is just too many parking lots. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know if you noticed, but if you may want to keep, if you're going to do a black and white diagram, you may want to keep the edges. But if you, for some reason, if you go to your color mode, it's hard. I mean, I'm using kind of lighter gray edges, so they almost disappear. But if for some reason you don't want those edges, you can just come over here, and I have an extension, Hide All Edges by Fredo, and just hide those edges. So the cool thing about that is then you just get, if you zoom in close, you just get that solid color and you're not getting any edge. But I mean, it was pretty hard to see. So it's not really that obvious. Maybe it's okay. But now here's the thing though, if you go black and white, what happens if you go monochromatic? Like if you want to do some sketching over the top, you're going to lose that striping. So just kind of something to think about. And then there it is. And then to see that striping, you'd have to turn your hidden geometry on in order to be able to see that. So I think I'm just going to leave it for right now. And if we decide that it looks better or whatever, then let's do that. So 30 minutes in, we have our existing conditions. I'm going to grab something. I have this little file here that I just kind of put, you guys saw this on the preview. And this was just some things that I would maybe use. It's not all the elements that I would use in a streetscape, but it's got some prototypical things. So definitely want to grab a couple of people, no bikes because it's not bike friendly, and only a couple of people because you're not going to find a lot of people walking in this part of town. And then I'm going to grab a car, and I'm going to pop those over here, and I'm just going to place them in place. So there we go. They're traveling. I want to make sure I'm traveling the right way. In the United States, we go this way on the right side of the road. And then, yeah, a couple of people. I already have a couple of people. And, you know, a few more, maybe a few more cars. Because again, you're going to find in this, when you design a neighborhood when you design a street for cars, obviously you get cars. And when you design a street for people, you get people. So definitely want to make sure I'm showing more cars than people in this. And, you know, it doesn't really matter how they're laid out. One thing I'll say that if you do more than one car like this, if you stack them like this in a diagram, you got to be careful. Like sometimes when I move them, like I shift them slightly like that. You know how they're not perfectly lined up. So when you go to look at it in elevation, if you have multiple cars stacked down the road, you're going to see that if they don't line up, it's kind of funky. If that bugs you, you can either just make sure you just show a single car, or just when you copy them to stack them, just be careful that you're copying along an axis so that when you see them in elevation, it reads as a single car. Pro tip. You with me, Mr. Charles Kelly?
Sorry, I had to step away for 2 seconds. I am right here, though.
No, I was kidding. I was just checking.
I am not with you. I had to take care of a quick thing on my end.
No, you get what I'm throwing down, though, right? Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
Well,
all right,
yeah, totally.
Let's do this. I'm gonna. Whoops. Okay. I want to transition because we're not at our halfway point, but I do want to. Well, I'm going to finish this off. I'm just going to take this module here. I'm going to make that a component. It's a component, right? Because if I'm going to copy it, and now it's a component, but it's not inside of the other component. So you can see that I've got, because if I did that, then it would repeat on both sides. But what I'm going to do is show some parking on this side here. And I'm going to add that curb, even though it's not necessary. It's kind of redundant, but I'm going to leave it in because why not? We'll treat it as a curb stop. So when we look at this now in elevation, when we grab our friend here, -1, when we look at this back in elevation, I want to point something out here. And again, this is like streetscapes are really kind of partial. I'm partial to them, so you can tell that I'm not, unbiased as here is the fact that, there's only so many years more that we can build streets like this, and while they serve a role now, this isn't really I don't think this is best practice design. This isn't a place that is comfortable for me to walk down. This is not a street that I enjoy. I feel outnumbered. If I did the math, this is an 8-foot sidewalk, this is an 8-foot sidewalk, and then if you double check this dimension here, that's 64. So if we do the math, that is 16 divided by 60. Sorry. I have to add it up to the entire right-of-way, which is 100. 16 feet divided by 100 feet. And is that 1%? 16 divided by, no, that's 10%. Wait, that's not right. 16 divided by 100. There we go. I don't know why I can't type. 16%. So 16% of this street is devoted to the public realm. But I want to say that this is not really accurate. And the reason why is because what we're missing here is things like this. When you grab, for example, this utility pole, where are the utility poles located typically? Charles, I'm asking you, not my, Charles, did you get up? Did I lose you again? It's okay.
I was muted.
I'll answer it. No.
What I was saying is it was just a little bit closer to the edge, just enough to like walk around it near the streets. But yeah, right about there.
Yeah. So on a wide sidewalk, it's not a big deal. You still got about 4 or 5 feet remaining. But if you only have a 4-foot sidewalk and you have a utility pole, guess what happens to that 4-foot sidewalk? Effectively, it's only a 2-foot sidewalk. And so imagine being in a wheelchair. Imagine pushing a stroller. So you have to remember that 16% that we devote to the public realm is actually less than 16% when you think about effective clearances. Things like signs, speed limit signs, stop signs, traffic lights, bus shelters. And bus shelters might be considered public realm or it might be considered transit infrastructure. So it really just depends on how you view that one. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to pause there. Now that gives us a starting point. I want to do a comparison. So I want to do a before and after, I wanted a starting point. So now we have something to work with. So we have some constraints. One thing that this street doesn't do very well is it doesn't define space. And I'm going to give you an example, is that we, in our brains, we like having walls. Like you think about a wall in a room, if you think about even a courtyard or a plaza likes to have like buildings around it. So it's defined. Here, there's no definition of space. So even if this cars weren't going 50 miles an hour and there was something cool to look at, it's still not well defined. So I'll give you a little tip here that in a perfect world, you would have a 2-to-1. So a 2-to-1 relationship would be height to width. So if the width is 100, it means that this height would be 50 feet, which is pretty tall if you think about putting a 50-foot tall building right up against that side. That, if this was a building, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle for fun, just for a moment, and then I'm going to copy that over. I'm not actually proposing that this is what we do, or even saying that you can do this, but now all of a sudden, the street's defined. The only thing is that the width of the sidewalk, right, compared to the building now feels constrained. So I'm just going to draw this in as a guide. We don't have to use it, but it's just a guide. So I'm going to create a new tag called right of way. And it's not, I put it on an X tag prefix because it doesn't actually exist, right? The right of way isn't like a physical thing that you would see if you went there. It would be, it's just something that's like in the code that says this is the right of way. So this is where you're building to. So getting rid of those, see, it's my job that we all learned something today, folks. We know that a good right of way looks to be about 2-to-1 and at a max, which would be a 4-to-1. So 4-to-1 would be, if we split this, probably more reasonable for this area, given that it's a bit suburban in nature, is that we would look at this being saying, well, if we don't do 50 feet, you could come up 25. And that would still give a sense of enclosure, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're breaking people, you're going too tall when people aren't comfortable for that. It's a little bit more of an incremental development. It's also something you see in a traditional downtown and Main Street, pretty much anywhere in like Main Street, USA, which is 2 to 4 floors. Right, Charles, you have a downtown in where you're at. So I'm guessing you have a street that has 2 to 3 to 4 story buildings that, it's
yeah. So there's
your
some
walkable
exceptions.
part of town.
Right. There's some exceptions with like a few much taller buildings, but for the most part, it's 2-3 floors max, where I'm about.
Oh, what did I do there? How did I do that? Oh, somehow So 2 to 3 floors, but 2 to 3 floors is nice though, because that gets that defines the street wall, right? It also gives you different uses. So you could have ground floor retail, you could have offices or apartments or something above. So that's actually there's a reason why that's a kind of a classic typology that you see all around the world, is because it works. All right, so I don't want to monkey around with this too much. I mean, this is really just me trying to illustrate conceptually, what we're trying to achieve. And then again, we don't have to sort of build within this envelope. It just gives us just sort of a frame of reference. So if I want to, I can turn that off and save. And let's go with, this is what we've got now. Let's move into where we want to go with this. What can we do with this? What can we do with 100 feet? So I'm going to grab all of this, except I'll leave the cars and the people for right now. But I'm going to grab this whole thing, and I'm going to make this a group, and I'm going to put it on a new tag called existing. And what that means is that way I can go back and forth between what is sort of there now, exist, if I could spell my acronym, my abbreviation. So what's there now versus what we're going to do, we can just sort of toggle back and forth. And I'll leave the cars for right now, though typically these, these probably won't be, these will probably have to move into that existing group, but let's just kind of, maybe I will. Maybe I'll just take those now. Copy them and then paste them inside of that existing group. So there you go. So when I toggle that on and off, you can see what I'm left with is just the right of way by itself, which is just my 100 feet. And I don't need all these little sublines on it. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm not going to build 50 feet. I know in this area, suburban area, they're probably like, no, we're not ready for that. But we could entertain, maybe something that's 2 to 3 floors tall. So let's give them, let's meet them. Let's meet people where they are. I think that's a good strategy. All right. So this is our, I'm going to try not to change that anymore. This is sort of our right of way that we're working with. And what do you see here, Charles? When you see this broken up into pieces, what does that kind of give the indication for you?
So it looks like, from a quick view, it looks like the two far ends should be the walkable space and the two inner ends being, or the two intersections being the drivable space, is how it kind of is pictured from what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have the ability to define actually separate spaces within the right-of-way. So it's not just one defining space as one big idea because it's such a long right-of-way. We actually have a zone and a zone and a zone and a zone. So we're going to be thinking about this as zones. As we move away from the street edge, you become less pedestrian. And as you move, again, if you go the opposite direction, you move towards the street edge, you become more and more pedestrianized with this idea that we're actually defining space within these key zones. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and start with that knowledge. Now I might come over here and just grab, again, I'm just going to start with that and that. So I have a couple of existing elements and I'm just going to paste them in place. Where are they? Oh, there they are. So whether I want to, let's see, I'm just going to set those off to the side here. And let's start with sidewalk. So the sidewalk, starting with something that is super basic. You think the sidewalk here, the sidewalk in our current condition is just 8 feet, which is not terrible, but not great, not for how wide the street is and how fast the cars are going. But the other thing is we're missing some things. The sidewalk itself isn't just one zone. The sidewalk has zones within it. So what I want to do is sort of represent a sidewalk that has some more zones. So first thing I want to do is let's just double the size of this and see what happens. To 6, oops. I'm scaling, so I just need to go to 2, right? So let's give ourselves some room to work. And then from there, what I want to do is I'm going to do that same score line trick that I did before, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to divide this into our sidewalk into, I'm going to switch to perspective mode. I want to think about this as 3 zones. So this first zone is what we call a furnishing zone. So this is, or sort of a frontage zone. So this is where pots and signs and sidewalks, maybe even little bistro tables and chairs. This is where door swings can happen, awnings, a lot of stuff can happen from a retail perspective here. Now, obviously not if there's nothing there, if there's no retail there, or there's no commercial, there's no institutional, you don't need a furnishing zone because there's nothing to furnish, or you don't need a frontage zone, there's no frontage. But we're gonna change that. So let's do that. So what we're going to do is take this, divide that by 2, and we're going to do just a little scoring exercise here. And I don't want to break the scoring, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the scoring that goes one direction, and I'm going to make that a component, and then I'm going to take the scoring that goes the other direction, and you're going to see why in just a second, because then the two don't break each other. So divided by 10. Whoops. I don't know what I did wrong there. Divided by 10. There we go. And then what I want to do is take a smaller one, so just from there to there. just that score line, and I'm going to grab it so that I'm basically taking the sidewalk module, and I'm times 10, and I'm sort of breaking it up into a smaller module. So you can kind of see, just literally based on the scoring, is that we've got these 3 zones. This is, let's see, he's window shopping. She's trying to get somewhere. And these 2 are maybe paying the parking meter, or they just locked up their bikes. So they are in what we call a furnishing zone. You're going to see in just a second what we're going to do there. So what kinds of stuff? We're going to furnish this in just a second. Let's keep building out some of our modules, and then let's bring in some frontage, because what we'll do is we'll respond to the furnishings based on the frontage. So right now what I want to do is build out. Now let's think about this when we think about more pedestrian to less, and we think about slower transit to faster transit modes. What would be, you kind of answered this in the beginning, Charles, but what would be between a person and a car in terms of speed and safety?
A person, between a person and a car, a bicycle?
Bicycle, yeah, exactly. I was hopefully an easy one for you. Well, you said because you'd gotten hit by bikes, and I think one way to, so a typical bike lane is this, right? What you see here is, if I just grab a car really quick, let me just grab one from my existing, okay, and then turn that off. What you see here is that oftentimes you have the cars parked here, and then if we grab a cyclist, we're going to need, excuse me, sir, can I borrow you for just a second? Sure. So if we have, no, I don't think that's going to work. Let's leave the colors on this one. So if we have the cyclist here, and he's here, and then you have a car here, what's the problem? What's the problem with this scenario? As somebody who bikes, you probably know, Charles, what is it? What do we have to watch out for here?
I mean, shifting lanes, opening doors, cars drifting into other lanes.
Turning,
there's so much that you need to watch out for.
Double parking, delivery trucks
Right.
parking, doors opening. Yeah, exactly. This is not a fun space to be in between cars that are going 45, 50 miles an hour, and then parked cars and cars with doors that are opening and closing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite. We're going to go ahead and switch those, and we're going to move the parked cars out so that the bicycle lane is adjacent to the sidewalk, and then the parked cars get to actually create that buffer. So let's do that. Let's create a bike lane. It's my long-winded way to say, let's put our bike lane right up against. How big of a bike lane do we want? I'm going 6 feet. And then the question is whether we raise it or not. If it's in the street, we got 2 options here, Charles. If it's in the street, we can protect it as it should be, or if it's raised, then it really sort of feels like more an extension of the sidewalk. Which direction do you want to go?
Let's protect it.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty solid option there.
All right, well then we're going to leave it. We're going to pretend like the curb, we're going to go ahead and leave it at what we're going to call roadway grade, but we want to create a buffered bike lane just to encourage more users, because I think that psychological safety, even if it's only psychological, it's important that we address that. So let's create a buffer here. I'm going to make this buffer 3 feet. And that should be big enough. That should be enough that if somebody was to, open a car door, that door swing would be protected. Or if you needed to put signage, like if you needed to put no parking or drop off only, that kind of thing, then that could go there. So
yep.
Yeah. And then this one I'm going to change the color of it to something that is more, that kind of says more bike lane. Cool. Whoops. So now there's a couple ways to do this. You could put a curb in, or you could put it, if you're going to spend more money, you'd put this raised curb in. But if you wanted to be a little bit less expensive, you could just put those like plastic bollards,
Right.
and that could be enough. But I don't know. We're having fun here. Let's go big. If we need to change it, we haven't really looked at what we can fit. I need to look at this center line and now look at what this does to our lanes, because it's all trade-offs and compromise. So if we do this, if I first thing I want to do is bring my lane width down. So to slow the cars down a little bit, let's go from 12 foot down to 11. I know that doesn't seem like a big difference, but even just that 1 foot is going to make a difference because it just sort of reduces the width of the driving lane. And then these two need to be scaled down. So let me turn my cars off. I'll bring them back here in just a minute. Oops. Both of those, scale those down. They should be at drive grade. So at 11-foot modules, what can we fit? We can't fit one more. I got to decide whether we may have to adjust something because remember, we're locked in. So if I have this here, that means that my center turn lane will reduce in size to 6 feet, which is not sort of big enough. Now this bike lane, we have to decide. We need to give ourselves, for a center turn lane, it'd be nice to get 10 feet, but it can come down a little bit. So that means we got to pick up 4 feet if we're going to do this. I'm going to take these lanes down 1 more foot. So I'm going to go ahead and make those 10 foot. 10 foot is a perfectly reasonable size travel lane, by the way. 12 is bigger than it needs to be. So just that gets us 2 extra feet just by going from 12 to 10. And then, which means that we now have, let's see what we've got. So if we got 2 feet on each side, that should give us 4 feet total. That gives us a 10-foot center turn lane. So that's 10, 10, 10, 10. I think that's good. Now we have to decide though, I mean, this was a busy street. So we have to decide whether you're going to go from 3 lanes down to 1, which is maybe too much of a compromise. Or what we can do is go from 3 lanes down to 2. Or you can go create like a flexible edge. So in some ways, sometimes this could be travel, sometimes this could be parking, sometimes this could be an extension of the public realm, depending on what your goals are. Let's go ahead and put some on-street parking. Let's go ahead and draw this. I'm just drawing from scratch. These are just like these little, you've seen these, what do you call these, T's? They look like T's.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see them sort of designating where on-street parking is.
Right. Exactly.
Make that a component. And then I know that's 22 feet, so I make a copy and go 22 feet for parallel parking. And then I can go times 2. Whoops. Sorry, I exited that command, so now I got to do that again. So in this case, I'm just showing where you can get 3 cars in. Now that could either be 3 cars. Now you don't really need 10 feet for 3 cars. So if we really wanted to, if this does be parking, if this becomes parking, then we can actually bring this down from 10 feet to 8 feet. So 0.8, because that's a 10-foot module, and bring that over 2 feet. So that means I can get that one. I can get that. That's probably a good idea. If this is going to be a bus lane, if we're only going to go with 1 lane, I'm going to go with 12 here because if we're going to have a bus in there, then let's bring that one back up again because we're buffered. There we go. So now let's pop back into our existing, and I'm going to grab this. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to grab our median striping. And then if I turn existing off, and then I'm going to move that over to there. That means I need to come back into existing and grab our lane striping. And come back in and paste this. Oh, that doesn't work, does it? Oh, I know why. I know what I did wrong. You don't need lane striping because I'm only going to 1 lane. Is this what you thought you signed up for, Charles? You're like, oh, streetscapes, this will be fun. And you're like, wow, this is a lot of math.
I'm a big believer in walkable cities, right? I think that there's a huge missed opportunity with public transportation and walkable cities, especially in Colorado where I'm based. And this is great to see. I love this stuff.
Okay, so now I know we've only got one side of this thing built, so we can flip it, and if this cycle track, again, it doesn't have to be symmetrical. So if you wanted to give a bigger bike lane and have 2 lanes in one direction on one side of the street, and the other side might have a smaller sidewalk because there's less retail. So again, or you could just take the whole thing and flip it and say, no, bike lane goes north-south, go in one direction. And then, so it really just depends on what you want. And again, this is all drawing from experience. So I'm kind of making this up, but I'm also thinking about places that I've been and also things that I wish that I saw more of, So sometimes I see something and I go, oh, this is really cool. Like, let's apply this in other areas. So I'm going to just kind of off to the side, place a few things. Now that we have some transit, now that we're moving towards multi-modality, we may want to just show the bus. And the reason why is it's more of an image thing. It's saying, oh wait, this is a street where I think transit can become more, this is a street where people may actually be encouraged, because once you get off, the difference between a non-walkable and walkable street is you can get off a bus at a downtown district and then you can walk from there. You can walk all around. Right. Problem is now, like even when you go shopping, sometimes the same shopping center, like there's literally no connection between the grocery store and the hardware store. They're like, do you know, have you ever been to a place and you're just like, I got to get back in my car and just to get to the other side of the parking lot. So This is kind of cool where transit works better when you can get off and then you have access to all these things within a walkable area. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this sort of module that we sort of set up for ourselves. Oh, I'm going to make this one unique because I want to unhide that. There we go. I want that curve edge to show. Yeah, let's grab that. The hardest part about this is just kind of thinking. It's not the modeling part. The modeling is the easiest part. It's the actually having something smart to show and having something that, is somewhat, this is a concept, so you got to take it with a grain of salt, but something that will somewhat feasible, somewhat based on reality. I don't want to go too far and then be like, whoa, like he's showing Mars rovers and stuff. I don't know. So one thing you can do is you can also think about this idea of, if I was thinking about the parking lane being a flexible lane, then that's where you might do something like you would want to show some crossings here. So I'm just going to make this up. Do that 0.1 again, make that a component, and then divide that by, divide that by 3. I can always change the spacing later. So we may want to do something like that, which is to indicate, just to kind of let people know, oh wait, people may be crossing here to get to this bulb out, and then this bulb out may have some transit infrastructure on it. Drop GC. So chat's been quiet. Hey everyone.
Chat's been pretty quiet today.
You guys have been quiet today? Maybe it's their holiday? Maybe it's just like transit infrastructure isn't everyone's favorite thing. That's okay.
Nathan makes a good edit here. Having a bus lane down the middle, we actually have those in Colorado. Where there is it's mostly a single lane, except for points where buses can pass each other, and they're pretty set on a schedule, and it works pretty well. So
yeah, giving the center lane. If you didn't have so many curb cuts, and you could figure out how to make the turn work, which is always the biggest challenge, which is things like, okay, well, how do you make this turn safely? But giving an alternative to what we're doing here is to give this bus, which is, if we change the color of this, you can see just how quickly that denotes to extensions. Oops, I didn't want to launch InDesign. I do that all the time because my dock is on my other monitor. So I end up all the time accidentally launching that. Let's see here, make unique. How do I want to do this? I'm just gonna explode. Explode. And paint that white. There we go. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. If you had it in one, problem is that we have the bus in one, in this case, it's a bus going one direction, because you would need, because of the width of the right of way we're doing. So you'd have to have another street, like a couplet handle the bus. You don't have them both going in the street because we've given 100 feet. You can see actually how hard this is because 100 feet sounds like a lot. And when we were looking back here, if I just kind of turn this off briefly, when we were looking at our existing one, it's like, oh wow, we have a lot of room to work. But actually the reality is that when you start talking about meeting all of these different users' needs, it's really it can be quite constrained. So looking at things like flexible uses or how to accommodate multiple modes using the same infrastructure is sort of a big thing. So I'm just going to go with this. Again, this is kind of like a module. You could show alternatives. Like I could put this on its own tag, and then we could come and just hide this. And this could become very quickly and easily. It could become, let's go with a narrow planter. Like, for example, take that out, pull this up 3 feet, F 2 inches, push down 3 inches, and then where's my grass color? Oops. Group that. I'm going a little too fast. When you go too fast. Do you know what I mean? So you see what I'm going? See where I'm going with this?
Yeah, 100%.
It's super flexible because that's why it's called like a flexible curve, because then all of a sudden, I know that having maybe just a handful of chairs maybe isn't. Let's see here. If we move that chair in a little bit and we tighten things up and we use a little bit, we spill over a little bit into that sort of buffer zone and hope that that doesn't impact the cyclists. Let's see here. Divided by 4. I mean, look at that. You can fit 5 tables of 2 people. That's 10 people into like a little parklet space. Do you guys have parklets where you're at? In some of the, I know that was kind of during COVID.
They evolved more so over COVID, right? So a lot of the businesses downtown were forced to kind of put a lot of their businesses out into the street. So it's not built out like this. It's more like, I wouldn't say like makeshift tents, but there are like tents
more
outside
temporary looking and less like permanent infrastructure kind of thing. Yeah, so I don't know about that. That might be it may be better to go the other way. And again, now when the traffic slows down, if they're going 50 miles an hour, you're probably not super excited about eating here. But if traffic slows a little bit, this could be kind of actually a pretty cool spot. Because actually being on the street is kind of exciting. It's dynamic. There's people watching. You know what I mean? So if it's not buzzing by at like 60 miles an hour, could be kind of cool. Move him back. He's a little close to my parklet. All right, so let's get some frontage in, and then I want to repeat this on the other side. And then maybe we'll make one side unique. We'll bring in some street trees, but let's before we get too far with furnishings, I want to do a quick time check, and we're doing great on time. So, and the other thing too is I'll ask, so maybe some people will pause and see what some people want to see. I think we have the opportunity to do an intersection, which would be kind of fun, because right now I'm just sort of thinking this almost as like a little cut, like you just cut a section through the street. But I think when we get to the intersection, it's going to get, especially when we do before and after, how we extend those curves, it could be really interesting. So I might want to put a dashed line in here though, because even though there's, or a straight line, even though there's parking on there, I think it would just read better if we just sort of delineated that. So I'm going to grab this, turn my hidden geometry on, take this whole thing and just kind of bring that back just a little bit. Something like that. And then copy this over. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll change my mind, but let's see here. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I'm trying not to eyeball it. I'm trying to like be proper. Okay. So what's cool about this is that even though this is on-street parking, what we would do is, you know, we would probably label this separately, because you can see that you have different uses. Again, between, I'm going to group all of these together. So that might be what I put on a parklet tag. And if I go color by tag, I can grab that whole thing and just go to parklet, right? So that's purple. And if I turn parklet off, and I turn that one back on, right? So now we have one that could be a transit module. And I'll grab some people. This guy's waiting for his bus. So look at all the stuff that's happening. Like already, just briefly here, you can see how much more dynamic this environment becomes, because now we have multiple modes of transportation. We have active transportation being represented. And then we have some space for activities to happen on the sidewalk.
Right.
Yeah, cool. It's getting there. It's getting there. Let's pop over to my little cheat sheet. I don't need InDesign. I'm gonna quit that. Didn't mean to open that. So sorry, InDesign. We'll play late. We'll do page layouts and spreads later. Actually, we're gonna use layout for that. So. See here. So again, we look at scale of buildings, you know, between 2 and 3 floors. We can kind of play with that module. But if we're looking at something like minimum 25 feet, that's 36. 2 floors could be anywhere between 24 and 30. So let's just go, I don't know, let's go big. Let's go big. Let's see what happens. So we're going to get some development that's building. We're going to, instead of setting back, we're going to build 2. So build 2 means we bring this up. I don't need so many buildings here for this module, unless I repeated the module. See, this is where this kind of gets fun here, is that if I grab everything, let me turn cars and people off for just 1 second, because what I want to do at this point, and I want to leave that separate because this is a floating thing, but this whole thing can become a component. That's going to be different too. See. This is locked to that, so that becomes its own component, and then that all gets grouped into its own. And then from here, if you wanted to extend the street a little bit, you can just literally take that same component and drag that over. The only thing is you want to do with that module is probably don't want to do what I did here, is when you space these guys out, you probably want to come in here and say, I'm going to start here. Yeah, that's going to be, you probably want to build it in a module that is aligned to your parking, or else it's not going to work. The other thing is you could scale this negative. I don't know. Sometimes I think I know what I'm doing, and then I get in here, and then you'll notice it. I don't know what I'm doing. And that's okay, because I don't mind admitting that I don't know. Because if I don't know, I don't know. Oops. There we go. So you can see in this case, by mirroring that module, those parking stalls line up. And there's no reason, the only reason why that mirroring wouldn't work is if you have striping, if you want to indicate the direction of the travel lanes, which we can do. And then this one gives us the flexibility of where, you know, within those 22, that should be 22 feet. I don't know why it's not measuring. Why is my measuring tape not working? Oh, there it is. There's my 22 feet. So I'm a little outside of that. So this one, in this case, what I would do is pull that back a little bit. And of course, that's going to affect so that we stay sort of safely within one stall. But the other option, of course, is that you can take up, if you're doing outdoor dining or if you're doing a bus stop, you may actually not want to limit yourself to one stall. You may actually want to go a little bit bigger. Take 2. Why not? So there's that module there. And I might say, well, actually, we're just going to take one stall. So we're going to pull that back just a little bit. I don't know why I didn't do that before. And we'll just lose a little bit of seating. That's a tiny parklet. That's pretty intimate. But hey, you know, if you're a restaurant, you probably appreciate having some extra seats.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so now this gives us a little bit more room to work. So when I turn all this stuff back on, so you can notice, like, again, I'm keeping cars and stuff. I'm keeping them not inside the component because I haven't even mirrored this thing yet. Do you know what I mean? So I might even come in here and grab that. And then he's just a little shy, so I might take this whole thing and I'm just going to force it. I'm just going to fake it by doing a nonlinear scale because no one's going to come and measure and say, actually, those doors are showing at 9 feet and they need to be 10. So let's put some street trees. I feel like that's what's missing.
Cool.
I've got a tree here, and we got a couple of options. We have to decide if it's, excuse me, let me get some water. Water break. It's kind of fun with the green screen. Oh, wait.
It just disappears.
Oh yeah, the glass just disappears because I have chroma keying on for my green screen. So when I have this green color here, it gets kind of funky. So we've got a couple options with street trees. Now that we've given ourselves some more room for our sidewalk, we can actually either have planters, so we can actually, you know, have landscape planting. This could happen inside this furnishing zone, or if it's a very high traffic area and you've got people crossing, you know, from on-street parking, then we may want to put this in tree grates. So what's your preference? You want to see some green, or you want to see some grates? Mr. Charles.
Green.
Green. You was going green.
Yeah.
I was hoping you'd say grates because now you're going to change my score pattern, but that's okay.
Okay, I'm going to change it. We can do grates if you want to do.
No, I just already drew the scores, so we just have to come in here and say, well, let me see here. The only other way to do it without affecting the score is to create sort of a planting module and just bring this up. Oh, sorry, I'm inside there. I shouldn't be inside there. I'm going to work on top for right now. Is sort of take maybe two of these modules, pull those up 6 inches like a curb. Sometimes you'll see them raised, and that helps keep maybe garbage from falling in there. It helps keep people from, you know, stepping in the plants. But of course, at the same time, it could be a tripping hazard. So something to think about. And then instead of going all the way down 6 inches, I'm going to go something like 5.8 inches, right? So it looks... Oh, you can see what it's doing. Actually, I'm not going to go 5.8. I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go something like, I'm just going to come down 3 inches. I'm going to grab my green, everything but the green, grab my gray for my concrete, make that a component, and now I can figure out what my spacing is on those. So those, I would probably move these to be about 25 to 30 feet apart, but I also maybe want to just look. That's 30 feet, and that's 30. Well, I didn't do the score at an exact number, so I don't know if this is going to work. But hey, you know what the nice thing about working as in a component is that you can always go back and change it and say, you know what, let's actually let's change that to something else. So I'm going to take my tree, I'm going to copy that, delete it, I'm going to go into this component, and I'm just going to paste it in place and then move it into position. Actually, this could be rainwater guard. If you sink it even lower, you know, you could have you can have openings in the curb and it drains in. So if I grab that one and I don't know if I'm going to I may want to just grab this one here. Sorry, I zoom in and out a lot. It's just kind of how I model. I'm always moving around, and I forget that when you're watching at home, if I have a little bit more graceful movements, maybe that's preferred. Okay, does that fit? Or did yep, look at that. That fits perfect. So let's do that. Let's do 4 because it feels like it rounds it out. Otherwise it feels uneven. So if I was really smart, I would have measured what that distance was so that I had a predetermined, like if I was 100 feet this direction, I would do 100 feet this direction. So I'm working with that number, but I'm not. Now you might wonder what this disc is here. For those who've seen me or taken any of the landscape courses on campus, you'll know that sometimes I will place a 2D component inside of the 3D one. And the reason why is that if I go to plan view, then I can turn off, let me see here. I could turn off the 3D tree and I have a 2D one. And then of course, when I'm in plan view now, I can see that my tree spacing needs a little help. 1, 3, 4, okay, good enough. So that's cool. And you'll see when we get to layout, that might be something that we use. And so if I go black and white looks pretty cool. The only thing is this curb edge here. I accidentally hid that one. You can tell the ambient occlusion kind of gives you a sign. If you hide an edge, you get sort of a ambient occlusion kind of softens that edge just by default. So without that edge hidden, you can see that that edge sharpens up and it looks a lot cooler. So
nice.
Yeah. So that is, we're getting somewhere. Now so you can see in plan view, of course, I have to choose whether I want to show transit infrastructure or whether choose whether I want to show parklet. And then of course, if I do show transit, I'm probably going to have to make this a double the size of this because it's really just not enough space. But you know what? I'm going to keep moving on. I'm just going to leave it as a one parklet sort of module for the moment, and with the understanding that that if it was a proper bus stop, I would give it more space. Now what I want to do, because I want to mirror the side, and then I want to get to I want to do an intersection before we wrap up. And if we have time,
Perfect.
And I won't push it.
Yeah.
If we have time,
Awesome.
We can send it to layout, because that was the whole point of sort of working in with these modules, so that we can look at it in different perspectives. So we can go perspective, axo, elevation, and plan view. And it's built. The one model is built for all of those. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more module, and that is I'm going to let that be unique, and that's going to represent the building module. So if I did give the building a color, I could do that, or I could just assume that that's just a concrete foundation. So there we go. That's cool. Group those. And so this looks weird, like when you're looking at it now in elevation. That's where floating people start to look a little weird. This bicyclist doesn't line up. We're going to need another bicyclist for when we get to elevation, and that's okay. And then we need to turn on our 3D tree. So when we do elevation, we have, now by 3D tree, it's actually, I know it's a 2D tree, it's a face me. I'm just saying 3D because it will work in our 3D view. So it's telling myself, like, it's a difference between what I'm looking at in plan view, which is a 2D drawing. But then again, elevation is 2D too. Maybe I should say face me instead of 3D. There we go. If we're going to be proper, face me. It's more to type. All right. So Charles, whatever's going on with you, I'm going to just stop talking for a second, and then give me something to work with. I'm just going to put some furnishings, and I'm going to mirror this thing. So it's not really,
cool.
anything radical there.
Well, while you do that, I've got a couple things to mention. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're going to be at AIA next week in Washington, D.C. So if you are in the D.C. area and you are going to AIA, come stop by the SketchUp booth. We've got some cool things that we're going to show off. I'll be there. We'll have a good amount of the team is going to be there. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a really nice event. You can come and get your SketchUp socks. We've got a new pair available, and they're a hot commodity. They'll go real quick. So last year AIA, they went almost within a day and a half. This time we're hoping to have a little bit more for you, but they still get out there before while you can to get your sucks, and then also sign up for 3D Basecamp if you haven't yet. That's going to be in November. It's going to be a great time in Las Vegas, sunny Las Vegas, Nevada. We're going to be at the Venetian. It's a combined event with Trimble Dimensions, so not only do you get the great stuff that you expect with 3D Basecamp, but you get all the networking opportunities with Dimensions, and you can expand your network and your career. So really, really great events coming up. Yeah, that's what we've got.
Yeah, and we finalized our speakers, so that information is going to be coming online soon for those that maybe, some people, I understand why they may not register if they don't know who's speaking. But first of all, SketchUp's pretty dependable at bringing back is what we call our standbys, our regular cast of characters, and then of course we're always looking to bring some new voices and some new ideas. So that should be coming online shortly. So if you are waiting for that, that's okay. We'll get that to you so you can.
Yeah. Another one. I'm looking for some new influencers to work with. So if you have some great models that you're building, you can create some fun content. We're looking to work with a few more people. So I'm going to post a link in the chat with a sign up page, and it doesn't really. Right now we're not looking for the biggest creators on the planet. We're just looking for people who create good work. So if you have really high quality work, you're really passionate about creating, I would love to work with you. So I'll throw that in the chat here as well.
Yeah, and that takes some pressure off of me because I love doing modeling, but at the same time, we need a variety of voices, and I think we love giving shout outs and credit to our community wherever we can. So with that said, okay. So yeah, get in and help Charles out and get something cool. Share something cool with us. Let's take this whole thing. Sorry, now I'm ready. Now I'm like thinking ahead. So now I'm ready to talk again. I'm thinking out loud. I'm talking out loud. That's why thinking out loud, isn't it? Thinking out loud is talking, isn't it? Is that what you... Let's go ahead and bring this in here. Now, you know what? One thing we didn't do is when I said, well, if we need more space, if we want to do a double lane for the bus lane, one thing we can do is you come back over here with this right of way. And if you look at let's turn the buildings off for this, and I'm going to turn the trees off for this, and I'm going to turn the furniture off for this, and the cars, and the people, and the transit. I'm turning everything off for this. One thing we did is we held the back of curb right there, and we expanded into the street. But the biggest challenge with that is that that giving up lanes is really difficult. It may actually be easier to go into the development parcel and have a negotiation from a policy perspective with the developer, whoever's developing the parcel. Say a new bus line's coming in, that means the property is going to become more valuable, and you want to bring in and somebody's going to come in and say, well, let's do something with that space other than a parking lot. Well, this could be an opportunity to say, well, you know what? We are going to carve out, whether you call that a setback or an easement or whatever that is, but basically you're going to dedicate some of the sidewalk as part of your property back to the sidewalk. So if we felt like we wanted to do a proper double running bus lane, which we should, what I need to do is figure out what that is. That's going to be 24 feet. So I'm going to go 12 and 12. For right now, let's just do that. Let's just go 12 foot, 12 foot. And that's going to be, this is just my kind of measurement guide. So I know where that center point is. So this isn't a huge ask. Basically, I take this whole thing and I push that out just a little bit. And I take this whole thing and I push this out a little bit more. Oops, excuse me. That should be, oh wait, is this 12 by 12 or 24 by 24? I'm going to have to, excuse me. I have to go back another, I was going to say, that didn't look right. I need to go 6 feet on either side. So to get two travel ways, running ways for the bus, I'm going to give myself 24 feet. So even though I'm shrinking the travel lanes for the vehicles, I want to keep the buses are a little bit wider, And I think giving them a little bit of a buffer would be the kind thing to do. So you see what happens here is it means that our right-of-way, we've broken out of our right-of-way. We're now outside of that 100 feet. So we're basically going in, we would basically go in and to the developer on both sides of the street, if you can get them, if you can do that and say, well, you know what, we need this much space. And if I do the math here, it's 7 feet and change because I'm just kind of making up some of these numbers. Why is that not line up? Was that the, I see, I didn't move. I didn't shift that building. I didn't shift the building footprint over. That's why. Yeah, so if I double check that again one more time, yeah, you know, a little over 7 feet. It's like saying that when you build up to this, but you hold that 7 feet back and you improve it as part of the streetscape process. Some cities will make the developer pay, or will ask the developer pay as part of getting a permit to say, well, you have to develop the sidewalk because we don't have any money. So you might say like, well, we want you to build your building, but we want to build our transit line, but we've got this thing called the sidewalk and the streetscape. Help us make that really engaging and really awesome. So sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Let's see here. I'm using scale here, and let's see if I can scale to a midpoint. That would probably be the easiest thing to do. So give myself just a little reference line and there we go. Snap to that midpoint. Get rid of that reference line. It's temporary, or leave it. Doesn't hurt. So now I'm going to come over to my existing one. I want to grab my dash line. I want to grab that dash line. I think that's better than having, I think a dash line is going to work better here. I'm not a transit, obviously, as you know. I'm not a transit planner or engineer. So if you are out there, you know, again, like when I play architect or I play interior designer here with SketchUp, I feel like I get pretty close. My goal is usually to get pretty close, you know, but then also know that, like, well, code's going to probably say it needs to be this, and your jurisdiction may be different than, you know, my experience. So just keep that in mind. Something to keep in mind. Okay, so we're going to turn the building back on, the cars back on, existing stuff off, furniture. I'm going to go with the parklet instead of the bus stop on this one, because you can see why. It's because the bus stop is now, I made a center running travelway, a travel lane. It's not really going to work then to put the bus stop over there. You'd have to change the sort of configuration. Hey, we were off last Friday. Did you guys know that? It was a holiday here in the States. People were out of town. Holiday wasn't on Friday, it was on Monday, but we for Memorial Day.
Did you do anything fun over the weekend?
I don't even know. I've already forgotten what I did last weekend.
We smoked ribs. We got the smoker out. We cooked up some ribs, made up some potatoes. It was a nice weekend.
Nice. Nice. I like to go hiking. Just get out, go for a run.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have some spaces for people to hang out, we can start bringing in, we can start moving some people around and populating this. I do like to think about, like, when I put people in, I like to space them, you know, if someone looks like they're entering out of a building or whatnot, I kind of like to reflect that. If people are walking, sometimes people walk in pairs, so give them a partner, you know, if they might be together. Again, the cyclist is going to depend on which direction you're taking. If we're going to take this elevation, we should probably see if we can find a cyclist that works better in elevation. And if there's a guy waiting for a bus or waiting to cross a street, you know, we might just grab a few different kind of people. So I'm going to get rid of this guy. He doesn't really work for me. He's not really working for me. These guys are fun. they might be too messy in elevation view. It may just be too complicated, but I think on Axonometric, you can always hide them for that particular view, you know? Because like I said, when you have multiple people that are all stacked up against each other, it kind of works like in Axonometric here, like when I go to Axo, it works to have a populated, to have a lot of people, but then when you go to elevation, you can see that they just kind of stack, they just kind of like layer and they get a little messy. So if you're gonna do this, you may want to basically take all of these people except maybe one, whoops, wrong button. Maybe one or two or even three, and then just hide them. And then when I hide them, I also see that I'm floating some people. So then that kind of just gives you something. So now I can space those more appropriate for the elevation. I'm going to hide, whoops. I want to leave the parklet. Hide the transit infrastructure for now. And then, what am I going to do here? Kind of messed that up. If I was doing this parklet, I probably should have done the planters as modules, because then you could hide the planter that's in front of you so you can see inside the parklet. I'm just going to let that go for right now. And then I'm going to create a scene, and I'm only saving this as a scene. Technically, I don't have to have a scene for this, but the reason why I am is because I'm hiding objects. And now the only other way to do that in layout would be to have them on their own tag, so you can turn them off. And then this is also where we need to come back and look at where we placed our cars, because I moved, remember I shifted everything over. That striping's not working for me. Yeah. And then this bus, of course, has to come over here. And then we're going to do a copy of that. Whoops. I love it when that happens. When you move it and just goes whoop and goes into the ground. That's why you'll notice I drop stuff a lot. I'm using drop GC. So because whenever I move something, it kind of disappears. So I just, instead of figuring out where the bottom is, I just lift it up and then I right click it and I say drop GC. And it goes, and hopefully it's grounded, because sometimes you go to elevation view and you're like, oh wait, that guy's floating. But the goal is that everyone is sort of grounded. And again, if you want to have the right of way on there, if you want to put that on there, and that's probably good to have at least as a reference. You can toggle it off, because if you wanted to do it in layout, you could draw that line in layout. But you want to know where that is, because the back of the right of way is essentially the start of the property line. So if you didn't have that, so even if you have this temporarily, you want to show that, because you're going to want to indicate that the sidewalk now is encroaching into the development parcel, like here. So even if I just left that as a temporary guide and I froze it when I got into layout and I used my own like thick property line, because layout has a little bit more control over things like adding color or thickness in the stroke and things like that. So it might be something where I just want to, but I'd like having that in there because it's my reference. I don't need all of those on there if I don't want them. It's just, yep. So let's go back to where we started here. Let me turn that right away on. You can see, Charles, you pointed this out early, is that this idea that we have these zones, you have this sort of sidewalk zone in between the building and the street trees. You have this sort of active transportation zone, or this is sort of a transition zone if you're moving in between transit, like a bus stop and not, or if you're parking your bike and you have this sort of furnishing zone. You'll notice this furnishing zone sort of doubles as almost like a flexible zone. And then you have this curb edge here, which also can become a flex zone, but with priority or with a transition to vehicles. So you have sort of this hybrid space here where you could do bike corrals, or you could do, again, the sidewalk cafes, or you could do bus stops, or you could do a car share, like a ride share vehicles could be parked there. There could be a lot of things that happen in that flexible space, because our curb space is actually super, super valuable. So that's that. If we wanted to mirror this, we could. And what that would do is when you look at it in Axonometric. So if I did want to, yeah, the running way is going to be a challenge. I don't think we have enough room to have the platforms for the buses, to have a center running way. I think we need more space. I'm going to leave it right there for now because we're going to be, otherwise I'm going to run out of time if I rebuild the whole thing. I want to show you something interesting though, is that here in Axonometric view, if we look at it in Axo, what happens is that if we're kind of trying to mirror the development and say, hey, there's development on both sides, what we kind of run up against is, well, let's just do it. Let me just do it. I'll just stop talking. Let me just grab this thing and I'll flip this over. Now, if I want it, yeah, I want this one separate because I'm probably going to edit it. So let's leave this one separate from the other one. So now when we look at this in elevation, it looks cool because, you know, we're framing, we have this to frame the street on both sides. Oh, you know what I need? Is I need this. And I need that right there. Because when you look at that in elevation, you want to see, oh, and I also probably want to drop this down. So just like I had those score lines, I might want to bring those down. And that just kind of indicates if I wanted to change the color of those, like make that slightly different color, whether that's lighter concrete or slightly darker, you know, I may want to come in here and, although now, oh man, actually don't want to do that. What I may want to do instead is copy this module over. If I'm going to change the color of it, I should make that furnishing zone its own module. And the reason why is because I can paint on the outside of it with a slightly darker color. And you can see what happens now is that now I don't have to draw those lines on there, is that I have my sort of typical sidewalk zone, and then I have sort of this transition furnishing zone. Yeah, cool. Save. No one reminded me to save. That's okay. So let's do, let me finish up this because the point I was trying to make was that in Axonometric view is this building kind of blocks what's happening on the street. So if it's just a mirror image, it's maybe less of a big deal. But if it's not a symmetrical street and it's not a mirror image, then I think what we're finding here is that, let me make this chat a little bit bigger so you guys with your long chats can get more in. What we could do is sort of come in and just grab, I'm just going to grab this facade. We'll see why in just a second. Paste that in place, grab a rectangle, and then get rid of this building. But I do need the base, so I didn't want to get rid of that. A lot of pasting in place, a lot of snapping. I haven't thought about using snaps for this, but that would be a good use of snaps, is to create these components in it ahead of time and build snaps in, and you just go poof, 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 and
no, that'd be great.
That would be awesome. So if I was super smart, I would have like prepared that, but I didn't. So what I'm trying to do here is do something like this. Maybe not that much. Do you see what I'm doing, Charles, here?
Yeah.
I don't want these lines here because what I'm wanting is just a really simple building facade.
Right.
But I want the edges to show up. Yeah.
So that you can see
through
the building and not have it be all cluttered.
Like in elevation view, perhaps this facade only needs to be not. Yeah, perhaps this one. So when you do it when you're in the Axo, maybe that looks weird like that. Maybe I did that wrong. Oh, you know what's even better? Oh, I got it. See, it's been a while. It's been a long time since I've done this. I had to do it for proper. All right. What you can do is you can just draw a plane over here and just make that make that white, and then make that part, and then make this building here. I can just put that on a dashed layer, S dashed, and by layer I mean tag. So I don't know, you don't really need to dash it. I don't know if that helps, but if you do want to kind of make it look like it's, and that one I'll go to dashed too. Okay. Oh, how come that one didn't work? Oh, because I put it on cars. Okay, so see, I don't think that helps. So in elevation, it's white because I put the white panel in the back. But in Axonometric, the building is sort of see-through, right?
Right.
Yeah. That was a long, it's a long way to say that, like, I want to see through this building because I don't want to block what's happening, all the cool stuff that's happening over here. So if I grab some people, let me grab some more peeps from over here, some people that maybe didn't get represented. Okay, grab some of those peeps. Come back over here. Paste them in place, don't paste them into the building. And again, I'll use that little drop technique and see if I can get them to drop. So this also might be an area where I want to grab this cyclist and just copy them over again. So when we look at that elevation, there we go. So I'm going to do this. I said I wish I did this before, so I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to pull this open. And I don't need that on the ground. And the reason for that is because I know that in the parklet, you'd probably want that sort of protected. But I think what I'm going to do is do that because I think in the elevation, it sort of looks better. Right? You can kind of get a sense that maybe that's a good reason to go back. I keep going back and forth. I can be indecisive sometimes. You know, I think maybe just pulling these chairs in so visually it doesn't look like it's leaving that space, but also you can fit more in, huh?
Yeah.
It's more efficient this way. So if I turn my trees off, you're overthinking it, Eric, again.
Well, while you do that real quick, I do want to just shout out to Igor, who mentioned that they want to get a little bit more familiar with snaps. We've got some great videos on snaps that we've done. I think there's a 2-video series that Tyson's done over snaps and then more snaps. So I'll throw that in the YouTube chat for you. So that's a great place to start delving into snaps if you're not familiar with it.
And Tyson did a live stream and I think we had one of our developers come and just explain the rationale for snaps. That was kind of a fun to have a guest, on besides just our normal co-hosts. So that was kind of fun. What's cool about this is you could make this a component, not the parklet, just the tables and chairs. And then you can also have them in, like I was saying, in this furnishing zone. Well, maybe I wouldn't want to make it a component because there's not enough space. Yeah.
Can you, real quick, once you're done with this, go to the cyclist model that we have, or in the space. Peter brings up a good point, but I just want to check it out. Like the cyclist who's actually in the lane. Yeah. Yeah, that cyclist. Oh, okay. So it's just always facing. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So when you're turning this way, it doesn't work, but when you're this way, it does. Right. Right. So it's more picked for elevation. So when you're at the Axo, which I haven't. So when I go to Axo, I think it's okay. I think this sort of position still works, but I do like when you get to see, the actual tires and stuff.
When you're doing that view from further away, it's less obvious that the bicyclist is driving towards the bike rack, and maybe they are just driving towards that bike rack right there. They're putting away their bike.
Well, you can also have two. You could have one. If we saved a scene and called it Axo, then I would hide this person and I would update this one. And then I'd go to elevation and I would hide this one and update that one. So you can have more than one. See, Axo, they're looking that way. Elevation, we're looking this way.
Cool.
Cool. Uh-oh, got a little air gap. Sometimes when I do this is why this method, I sort of love and hate it, because sometimes it's like faster on the onset, but then sometimes when I'm using the stretching tool, sometimes if you mess up, then you got to go back in and fix things. So, all right. So looking at the time, I'm going to do a little part of an intersection. So just at least where the street where the sidewalk sort of becomes the edge of the street and rounds the corner, and then where the crosswalk would occur. So I'm not necessarily going to build out everything, with medians and street lamps and stuff like that. But, speaking of street lamps, that's something that's probably missing from our model too, which we might want to think about bringing in. But again, let's see here. So I kind of want to go white and transparent. Was I already white and transparent? Maybe I was. Okay. So save, let's do this. Let's think about this. So how do I get, this is going to be a bit tricky. So how do I get from, if I'm going to go across this street here, I've got to get, you've got stuff going on, right? You've got the building corner, you've got this curb edge, you've got a lot of stuff. So let's figure this one out. I'm just going to kind of wing it. I know I've got to get to there. And I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to give myself a 15-foot radius for the street corner. And again, it depends on, I may give myself more space and still use 15 feet. But for right now, I'm just going to grab that and I'm just going to use 15 feet. So what I do is I know that 15 feet, if I do a circle and I do something like 60s, because I want more 60 sides, because I want a nice smooth curve and I want to snap that. Don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. So right there, I've got, let me just hide that. So here, actually I might want to leave that because I may want to work with this. I may want to work with this separately from this. So let's just group that. Let's just group this whole thing. So we know that this is a pretty typical sidewalk, but the other thing we need to think about, if this is 15 feet and if this sort of a side street doesn't require such a big sidewalk, we could do something like this where we come in here and we go 8 feet, we split that in half. So then what we do is we have some on-street parking. So, and we can bring that down by, whoa, that was cool. I'm just going to delete that, start fresh. I don't want to work in a group for this. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up 3.5 feet because we want to give ourselves a curve. So what we need to do is transition. So what I haven't done is I need to do like a reverse curve. You guys kind of saw this. I kind of did this when we were doing the coffee shop model. So I kind of need to come around this side. In fact, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go back. Okay, I'm going to do this flat, and then once it's flat, I'll remove the part that I don't need. So I'm going to split this in half, and I'm going to take this circle here, and I'm going to do that, and then that sort of gives me something to. No, that's not a good enough tangent. I want to go. What do I want to use for my transition? 10 feet. 8 feet times 2 should be plenty. So what we want to do is we need two arcs, one that goes concave and one that is convex, depending on the direction that you're looking at it. And there's probably more precise ways to do it than I just did it, but sometimes quick and dirty does the job. So that comes down 6. And I'm going to grab this color here. That's our street color. And then I'm going to grab this for our sidewalk color. If I want to group those separately, I can. But this is where it gets tricky, because we've got a few things going on here. We've got these, we have to cut the space because we decided to go, instead of raised, we decided to do at grade. For better, for worse. Which is going to be tricky because now what we're doing is we're going to be competing with the idea of crossing the street is going to compete with the bike lane. So we have to sort of figure out, maybe we just curb ramp in one direction and we just cross this way for now. So that, figure out how much space we need for a curb ramp. Let me turn that into, I'm going to turn that into perspective mode because it might help see it versus, yeah. What's happening here? That's weird. Kind of messed something up there. Oh, I'm going to ignore it. So this little bulb out here, if we're crossing in this direction, then this bulb out here, let's see if I can do this right. If I do the math, it's going to be, we can come out, if we have a 6-inch curb, which sits flat, okay, now did I break that? I didn't break that all the way. Why not? There we go. So a 6-inch curb goes flat, and then we need to come back 6 feet. So 6 feet is going to give us, we don't necessarily have to do, oh, actually, you know what? I'm just going to grab that. That's perfect. Let's grab this edge here because this will give us what we need. So what we want to do is figure out where we want the curb ramp to go. I'm going to go here. Let's line this up. Do we want to line that up? That's not going to give us enough space. So the easy thing to do would be on this side would be to bring this flat. And then we can pull that one off. Yeah, see, now I'm getting sloppy. I'm getting messy. That's usually the time in the show where it's like, it's time to call it. Once Eric,
exactly, we're getting close to the end here.
We're getting close to, oh, we are getting close to the end. I would just want to do a curb ramp. Can I just do a curb ramp? Sometimes I will just give up. Because I think my problem is that, like, well, my problem is that it's not enough time to do this whole thing justice, because I want to do the crossings, and I want to do, you know, add the furniture for maybe some parking meters or some bollards if it's a flush curb, you know, all the striping. So here it's just like, I don't know, maybe I'll just fake it and we'll just call it. So 2 more minutes. Yeah, I've got better ways to do it than this, but I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to sandbox it. So if you go View, Tool Palettes, Sandbox, not Selection Toys, Sandbox, and from Contours. And so there it is. So there's my curb ramp.
Nice.
Yeah. And so this one here would come back up. And then depending on how you do that, again, if it's a cross slope, you'll want it in 2 directions. But this is where I just come like this. I'm having trouble snapping right now. Okay, there we go. And reverse that face. Make that. So if I wanted to get rid of this, I could, and I'll tell you why, because I don't need it, because if I took this roadway module, just, you know, keeping consistent by using components, just want to get to a good stopping point here, folks. We're real close. So thanks for everyone who's stayed with us this long. because it can, you know, sometimes we know where we're going and sometimes we don't. Sometimes you don't exactly know where you're going. And I'm going to take this, delete that. I'm going to go in here. Let's see, I don't know, I may regret this, but let's see, paste that in place. And then what I want to do is, now this block is not a full block. You can tell that I did not give this a full block size. This is only 150 feet, so this is only half a block. I wouldn't make this module. I would come over here and I would double. I would take this thing here. If I wanted to do a full block, I would copy this whole module because I'm only at about 130 feet. So a good block size is, you know, about 300, 350. A Denver block, did you know Denver's are about 350? Salt Lake City's are about 600.
Interesting.
Portland, Oregon are 200. They actually have tiny little mini blocks in Oregon. In Portland.
Interesting.
Yeah. So when you think about streetscapes and walkability, but then when you factor in intersections, now all of a sudden you're talking about a block. So now we have a sort of a set distance, you know, between those two. So that one would go here. Almost done. We're just going to mirror this, and then we're going to. So I have this feels like at least a finished block. And if I was super smart, oh yeah, I wasn't, because I'm now making this a component group. That's okay. All right, so let's get this guy back into place. And then we're going to go ahead and take a look at our views. And I'll show you what we'll go to layout next time with it. All right, so let's set up some views here. So this is our Axonometric. So let's get that into frame. And update. You'll notice again, the further away you go, if you're in your colored mode and you zoom out, then having those edges on the striping, you can see that darkens the striping. But in this case, I'm gonna stretch this all the way over, and I'm gonna move this all the way over. I'm gonna sketch that all the way over. Yeah, okay. And let's see, we need our tree zone, don't we? And so that's our axonometric. Looking good. Here's our elevation. Let's see if that, there we go. Okay, so let's move that, sort of get the whole thing in view. So I can save the view, and so we can wrap it, and we can call it. There's our elevation. Turn our right of way on. And this right away, these interior ones, again, these are just for my reference, so that's not necessarily something that we need to show in the final. And then let's go ahead and save that. Let's go to plan view, and I want to turn the face me trees off and the 2D trees on. And again, this is if you're doing plan view, you know, you could always just come in and hide. You can always just come in and hide. Oh yeah. That makes more sense if I do that in two modules instead of one. Right, so in plan view, I'm leaving it. It's too late, it's late, it's Friday. So there's my street in plan view. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and add a scene, and I'm gonna call that, rename it, I'm gonna call that plan. Probably don't want to show your people on the plan. That's up to you. And then lastly, I'm going to go into perspective mode. So I'm going to switch my camera, and I'm checking my field of view camera. Field of view is 45. So I'm going to get myself down on the street level. So definitely want my people. And I give myself, you know, kind of a cool shot at what's going on, you know, something that tells the story a little bit better. And yeah, I'm just going to kind of do something like that for now. You know, this is sort of my perspective view. I'm going to add, rename, perspective, or just perspec. Okay, and we're done. I just want to toggle back and forth. I'm going to save all of this stuff. I'm going to put all of this on its own tag. I'm just going to group all of this, and we're going to put it on a proposed tag. So S proposed. And the reason why is because I want to toggle back and forth from where we started. We're going to wrap up by going back where we started. So here is the proposed condition. Here is a street of what we can do with the 100-foot right-of-way. We think about the street as a place and accommodating multiple modes and a destination. And then if we go back to where we were with the existing, I'm going to copy all of those just so that it's apples to apples. There we go. And I'm going to copy that. Yeah, you get it. You get the idea. All right. So there is our existing conditions. And we'll go back and forth between existing and proposed. Again, turn my hidden geometry off. J, hidden geometry. Existing, proposed, existing, proposed. You can come over here to elevation. Same thing. Proposed, existing. Right? This should all be on the proposed tag. Prop. There we go. Existing and proposed. Kind of cool. So a couple minutes after, I think we got not as far as I would like, but hey, that happens. That's live stream. That is how these things work, is we kind of have an idea, we push it, and we see where we can take it. So I'm just going to stop there. Hopefully you learned a few tricks today. Let us know in the chat. Now, if you're watching,
chat's thanking you for a great session. So,
well, thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to stop. I don't want to stop on the existing condition. Existing condition is kind of sad. I want to stop on the proposed condition. And even then, if I want to hide this, yeah, okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to call it. It looks good. So thanks everyone, as always, for tuning in. Go back and watch it. If I went a little too fast, just make sure you pick up one new thing. That's my thing. As long as you learned one thing new today, I'm happy. If you're happy, I'm happy. Even if you didn't learn anything new, I guess I'm still happy. So Charles, thanks as always for hosting, for co-hosting, and for facilitating the chat and sharing your experiences walking around and trying not to get hit by a car.
We're back next week, right? Are we taking another week off because of AIA? I don't think we...
Yeah, we are. Aaron and I will be out next week for AIA. So we have, we're not the only ones on the team. So we are in the works of seeing if somebody wants to step up and take over. So no pressure, Matt and Donovan. Just kidding. So no, actually, I don't know for sure who wants to take that one, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Cool.
So either way, we'll see you all soon. We're going to come back. If it's not next week because of AIA, then we'll do something. We'll do something special the week after that. So tune in, stay with us, subscribe if you haven't already. We've got weekly videos coming out too, live streams just Friday, something fun we do. And with that, I'm going to say go out and go do something, and turn the screen off. I'm going to take a little break here and go get some fresh air. So go for a walk. Hopefully you have a cool street where you live that inspires you, and go in and engage with your community. So thanks, Charles. I'm going to go ahead and play my music now, unless there's anything else.
I think that's it. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Let's do it. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.